Good day and welcome to yet another one of our weekly wraps from Rand Swiss. I'm Viv Govender, and as usual what we'll do is we'll cover stories of the week and how they might affect you and your investments. This week we're going to discuss three basic things. Firstly, we look at the pound and how it's basically fallen out of bed and basically dollar strength. The next thing we look at is the market fall. We had multiple days, down days in a row from the US market, and obviously this is something to be concerned about. And finally, what we can do is do a deep dive into what's happening in the Russia-EU energy market at the moment and how that's going to affect you going forward. Okay, let's start off. The first thing, the pound. The pound basically is approaching parity. It's amazing. To give you an idea, back in 2008, 2009, around about that period of time, it was almost 2-to-1 pound versus dollar. Like talking about like 14, 15 years later, less than that, it's basically 1.05, 1.03 at the worst. Who knows, by the time you guys watch this, it might be 99, might be below it. There's a joke out there that apparently 50 cents is going to call himself £1. But yeah, that is the pound at the moment. And why is that happening? It's because the new UK Prime Minister Liz Truss and her Chancellor of the Exchequer has decided to go out and be incredibly loose with fiscal policy. Firstly, what they're doing is they're cutting taxation. They're cutting taxation quite dramatically, and they're actually taking some of the limits off certain things that were put in place in the past. For instance, like banker bonuses are being unleashed into the world. And the second thing they're doing is that they're basically spending a lot more money, and especially on trying to subsidize fuel or energy to consumers. I mean, she's come out and said basically they don't want to have any rationing over winter for the UK. Look at the plan for Europe. Europe is basically planning on having 15% lower demand over the winter period. How is the UK going to adjust when they can't adjust prices and not going to have rationing? How are they going to adjust their demand to make up for that? If you look at, for instance, the UK's, which I'll talk about later as well, supply of or storage of energy, they have not stored much, of course, because they're not as vulnerable to the Russian market as others, but they have not really stored much, which means if there is a spike up in winter time as we expect there to be, we're going to see that country again under a bit of pressure with regards to its fiscal problems. So the pound's under pressure, and I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be solved anytime soon. The next thing I want to talk about is basically the market at the moment. The market's come down quite dramatically, and as I write this, we're basically just around 3,700 or so on the S&P 500. This is 500 points plus lower than we were just a little while ago, like a few days ago. Now, why is this important? Basically, we have hit lows that are comparable to the lows that we hit basically in the last fall before we recovered a little bit. And in fact, we are in danger of breaking through them, and we've broken through the intraday a couple of times. So if we do break through in that low for the S&P, I expect us to hit even lower lows, possibly somewhere in the region of about 3.3, 3.4 with the S&P 500. If you listen to basically some of the doom and gloom guys out there, the Michael Burrys of the world. I don't know if you recall, Michael Burry was played by Christian Bale in that margin call movie, The Big Short, about the 2008 crisis, and he's out there still investing, and he's talking about a fall that's below 3,000 on the S&P 500 eventually. So who knows, that might be a question. But what we are really seeing now is the market seems to be taking the Fed a lot more seriously. Why? Because last week's announcement from the Fed about raising interest rates seems to have indicated to the market that the Fed is not going to flinch at the first sign of pain, and that was never going to be the case. We spoke about this. The Fed is going to break, no doubt about that. The Fed will not go far enough to get inflation rates down to 2% in any reasonable amount of time. What they will do, however, is get them down, inflict a lot of pain, and then probably break before the pain becomes like unbearable. We are not anywhere close to approaching that level yet. Yes, the stock market's come down. The Fed does not care about the stock market. In fact, if you listen to a podcast by Neil Kashkari, who's one of the guys in the Fed, and he's basically the guy that stood on the TARP program back in the day. He's a bald-headed Indian guy with like massive eyebrows. He looks like a Bond villain. He basically came out and said that when they saw the market rise, the Fed that is, saw the market go up after the last rate announcement, they were basically unhappy about that. They want to see the market fall because they want to see the market believe that they are serious about things. So the Fed is going to be under pressure for a bit longer, and that's probably going to push the market a bit lower for a bit longer as well. And now we come to the big deep dive of the day: energy. I know I love energy, and we've talked about this a number of times in the past. What I really want to talk about right now is what's happening between Russia and Europe at the moment, and what's happening with regards to energy storage, with regards to industrial capacity, etc., going forward. So, big news this week: Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Something's happened. Who knows? There's lots of videos circulating about Biden basically a few months ago saying that if something happens, this pipeline will be shut down. And because when asked how we would do it, he said, "No, we'll do it." And there's suspicions that the Americans have sabotaged it. There's suspicions that the Russians have sabotaged it for some reason. There's suspicions that, it's some other third party, like the Ukrainians, that have sabotaged it. Who knows? All that is known is that there's a massive failure at this pipeline that is transporting gas from Russia to Europe. It's unlikely that it'll come online anytime soon. And these pipelines are incredibly vulnerable. I mean, basically, it's a long, explosive line traveling thousands of kilometers, often under sea, often, through territory that nobody's looking at. Literally, I mean, if you wanted to take down one of these things here, a man with basically a couple of sticks of dynamite could take down this pipeline easily. You know what I mean? And in fact, according to some reports out there, they suspect it was as little as like 100 kgs of dynamite took down this pipeline under the sea. So yeah, that is the pipeline under pressure. We have seen Germany make agreements with some Middle Eastern countries about basically transporting natural gas to them. They definitely are going to make these agreements. They're going to be done. Unfortunately, the storage doesn't exist to basically receive this. The infrastructure doesn't exist to absorb the deals that they've done. These deals are going to be basically powerful a couple of years down the line, but in the immediate term, not really going to make a big difference. We have seen a huge buildup of gas storage for Germany. For France, Germany is by number one, but France, Italy, all those places have really picked up on gas storage. The UK, like I said, almost none. But the UK basically gets its supply from another place, Norway, and does not need to have these kind of supply issues. The North Sea basically is where they get the energy from. They don't have the same dependency that the Europeans have on it. But my fear is that as we get into wintertime, and we see, for instance, prices spike up if there is a cold spell. It has to be a very mild winter to help the Europeans. If it's a cold spell, a cold winter, an unusually cold winter, we could find the Europeans under great deal of pressure. In that case here, you'd see prices spike up. Is the UK going to basically absorb these prices? There's a lot of possibilities around, who they basically divert supplies meant for Europe to themselves. Would they pay the prices that are going to be market-related prices at that time? Will the Europeans allow market-related prices at the time? Because we are seeing a lot of flux happening with regards to energy markets at the moment. The European Union is definitely intervening in energy markets. It's definitely coming out and saying that they're not going to allow prices to go ballistic without some kind of intervention. Sounds good in the short term. In the short term will help. Longer term is going to really discourage investment, really discourage basically capacity for the European Union. So we're talking about a situation in which we are seeing at the moment the final Russian dregs of supply are disappearing, and I think the rest of it will go quite soon. There's no way if either the Americans or the Ukrainians want to disrupt it, or even some of the other parties out there the other parties out there will basically want to stop the supply to Europe. Very easy to do. At the same time, we are seeing politicians intervening in markets to make sure that they have a smoother ride through this winter than otherwise. They're spending money like in the UK. They're also intervening with regards to the UK and elsewhere, legislation, taxation on these energy companies to try and alleviate some of the pressure that we are seeing on consumers. And again, I don't know how positive this is going to be long term. Economics tells you that if you reduce the price of something, the supply will also be going down because people don't want to produce as much. So that might be another effect. And finally, I want to bring another fact into place in Europe. We had the election this week of a new prime minister in Italy, Ms. Meloni. She basically is seen to be a rather right-wing figure. She's kind of the head of the party that basically replaced Mussolini's party at the end of World War II. So Mussolini was the fascist leader of Italy, kind of like Hitler was in Germany. Mussolini was in Italy, for those that don't know. Fascist, basically, like Nazi. No death camps, but pretty bad anyway. And she's basically being called a fascist by the New York Times, newspapers around the world. Major media figures are calling her that. And she's running basically the number 3 economy now in Europe. It's Germany, France, and Italy. We've seen pushback from the EU regarding this, including the mentioning of using some kind of sanctioning methods. The word used by the EU Parliament is tools. They have tools in their basket they can actually use. And why I bring this up at the moment is that as we go through what's going to be a very tough patch for Europe, unity is going to be very important. Someone like Mussolini is likely to be less in sync with someone like Macron or Germany or the rest of the European powers, the major European powers that a predecessor was. This means that there's going to be disunity in Europe, and apparently that's one of the things that Vladimir Putin has actually been betting on. He's betting that as we go through a bad winter, European unity disintegrates. There'll be more, ability for him to kind of wedge himself between the different parties, and that will weaken the sanctions, weaken some of the other measures that have been placed against his country at the moment. So, nothing to watch out with Europe. It's Meloni's election, and also to note is that she's not the first inverted commas fascist that has been elected. Another right-wing party was elected in Sweden, which is tended to be a very left-wing place, and we could be very easily seeing a massive switch around with European governments over the next year term. An important point to note is that in the UK right now, because of some of the issues around the pound, around the currency, around some of the issues that we're going into winter, we have seen Labour, which is the party in opposition in the UK, with almost a 20%, I think it's like a 17 to 18% lead over the Tories at the moment. If there was an election held tomorrow, the current government in the UK would be destroyed. It would not even be a close election. So we are seeing lots of political turmoil caused by these energy issues, and we are going to see them continuing and get worse as the winter gets worse. Okay. Again, on that depressing news, I look forward to speaking to you guys again next week. Have a great weekend. Cheers.